good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another video by SKippy. As you'll know if you've seen the introduction video, I'm actually converting the Guillow Spitfire 403 laser cut kit from the World War II early years Spitfire, turning it into a T.IX trainer, so a two-seater. So this is the laser cut version, unlike the last Spitfire that I built, which was just the pressed. What I can say already, having just looked at all the parts and starting it, is so much better, so much easier, saving a lot of time rather than having to cut it all out and then recut bits. These bits are literally just popping out. It's brilliant, much better. Okay, in this video I'm going to build the fuselage to a point that I can get the electronics in, so the elevator and rudder servos, make sure that I can fit the receiver in, but the challenge for me in this piece is I'm going to try and make the second canopy out of plastic bottles, something I've never done before. I've watched it on YouTube, but never to this small size. The guys seem to be doing the larger models, so yeah, never done it before. We'll see how it goes. I did mention it in the introduction, but yeah, let's go. Later cut parts so much nicer, so much easier to take out. As I've been doing that, I've noticed there's a bit of an error on the numbering, so that's F3, F4, when it should all be B parts as per the plan there. And you can see this one even says A3. That one doesn't have a number on it at all, so interesting the numbers are wrong, but when you put it over the pattern then you can see that it's fine. But yeah, laser cut, much easier, much nicer to work with, and it's nice wood, nice quality wood this time. Okay, the battery hatch I'm going to do the same as last time, so I'm going to slot it in between B1 and B3-4. So I'm using B2, cut it in half. This will be part of the centre hatch. B3 will be the cockpit end of the hatch. I need to create another B1, or another two for either side, and then I'll trim it halfway like I've done this one. Interestingly, when I built the last Spitfire, I noticed when B3 butts up against B4 as it suggests there, what you get, I can just do it, you get a lump like that, which is quite unsightly. I'm guessing if you were to do the build without putting a hatch there, the tissue would actually cover it and it would give it a smoother blend in, as if it's the cylinder heads within the engine or the engine cover. But obviously because I'm not, because I'm creating a hatch, that then just looks a bit odd. So what I'm going to do this time, I'm going to actually trim it and blend it in so that you don't have that bit of knobbly piece, which hopefully will look a bit smarter. That's why I thought I'd mention it on this build this time. Regards the F section, so that I can build the second cockpit in, I'm going to create another two B7s, position them just slightly in, so on the plan here, make another B7, move it in. These can then link up, they'll be connected to the middle spar, and then I'll cut this piece of middle spar out. It'll probably make more sense when I do it, so I need to make two more B7s. Once they're in place, I'll gently sand them down so that you get a better curve of the fuselage, because obviously that one will be the same as this one and it'll stick out a little bit, but again hopefully once I've done it it'll make more sense. Having photocopied the parts sheet, I've created the extra B1 sections that I need in the B7. They'll then go with the ready-made cut or ready cut pieces that then go for the hatch. So I'm now cutting out B1. These are already created. I'm going to cut out another B7 to put in here to then create the slot for the second canopy, second cockpit. So I'm going to do those now, just out of spare balsa sheet that I happen to have. So a little tip when you're gluing these of the other side on, because obviously it's not flat, to make sure they're 90 degrees, what I do is apply some glue to the part, then using a ruler, a straight rule, keep it pressed up against it and position it. That then makes sure that it's vertical. Obviously it's difficult to show you when I'm using one hand for the camera ready, but place it up against there, push it into the ruler and then lower it down onto position, and it sits nice and neat. And then as you can see, you get a much squarer fit. Okay, those are the main formers fitted. What I'm now looking at doing is installing additional formers that will create the second cockpit, which I'm showing on there. So roughly marked out where it features on the wood. I'll then glue the additional pieces that I've cut out into there, and then I'll trim them down. Then what I can do then is remove this piece of wood, which would free up the cockpit, and then I'll just bolts in between to give them a bit of extra strength. The battery hatch, just as a reminder, I'll cut this out and then build the hatch, and then all will be good. But again, I'll do some pictures when it's done. Okay, to make the second cockpit canopy, I'm going to make a balsa wood mould, I guess it is. Then I'm going to use a bottle like this and then heat it using my heat gun to then melt the plastic over the mould and hopefully create a nice canopy. What I've had to do first though is work out what size the canopy needs to be. So having created the extra cockpit, gives me a rough idea. It's about 40mm at the front, 37 here, so I obviously need it to taper and then slightly behind, and obviously I need to make sure that it's the right length to go down the side, because that is where the top of the canopy is, so that'd be the cutout. So yeah, now I need to work out how to do the wood. Okay, here we have the revised rudder with the pointier top, and also the revised elevator, which now has these sections. What I've done is I've already curved the edges, the trailing edges, leading edges. Also sanded this piece down so that there's more movement, same on here. What I'm now going to do before I can install it into the fuselage is cover it in tissue. Gives it a neater finish, gives it a bit of added strength as well once it's all varnished up and painted. One thing to add, I've left this centre section in of the elevator for now until I've put the wire in place, just so that I know that both elevators are going to be level. I apologise if you can hear the cat in the background. So yeah, I haven't forgotten this time, so I'll put the wire in, then I'll cut this piece out, and then I'll cover it in tissue. Okay, these are the tail surfaces cut out and papered. I've papered them now so that I can shrink the paper down and then fit them onto the fuselage, so that when I do the push rods I know it's all going to line up. So I'm going to leave this to dry for a good 12 hours before I shrink it. But you can see the change of the tail shape, and then the elevators here different at the end there. So yeah, all good. And remember to cut out the extra bit of wood so that the wire is there, so it will all rotate nicely. So I'm going to let this dry properly overnight and then shrink it down tomorrow. So as with all my kits so far, Power Pack F from Flight Test, I'm getting to a stage where I might want to, where I need to make sure that all electrics are working. So ailerons, both servos are moving, elevator, rudder, very gently the motor. There we go, all good. So I now know that I can go ahead and install them. As with my other aircraft, I'm going to run the push rod for the elevator and rudder through the formers. So what I'm doing now is just working out roughly where it needs to go, so it's as straight as possible to the control horn. And looking at it, it's pretty much in line with those two, or in the centre of those two stringers. So now I'm going to push the wire through that part and drill a hole all the way through, keeping it as level as possible, so it should come out on this former and be in the perfect position for the control horn. Okay, I'm showing this bit of the video because it is slightly different to how I built the Spitfire last time. This time I've got the elevator and rudder not crossing over, they're going all the way through the formers out to the other end, and hopefully when I move this now it should be free moving. There we go. So at the end, the wire should be moving nice and easily. Excellent. So now I know I can go ahead and start to build up around that area and then get the end covered. Right, now that I've fitted the servos in, I've put the holes within the formers for the push rods to go through all the way out to the end. I know that that all works, so that's why I've fitted the stringers. Now that I've fitted the stringers, I can now put on the canopy that I've made to see how good a fit it is. It sits a little bit too low at the front, but I'm okay with it at the back. And when I look at it from front on, unfortunately where I've cut it out there's a bit of a big air gap, so what I'm going to try and do, because I didn't film it when I did this one, I've reshaped my wooden block to make it look like it'll fit nicer with on that fuselage. Now I've measured it properly. To measure it I used one of these, so you just push it down over, you can then draw on and reshape it. I've done that, so I'm now going to try and video myself hopefully making a successful canopy using my water bottles. Okay, hopefully you can see what I'm doing with the camera up there. What I used to make this canopy is a small half-litre plastic water bottle. It's a really thin plastic, so nice and creaky. Obviously you need to prepare the bottle, take the label off, get rid of this plastic bit, trim the bottom. Here's the third one. Here's one I prepared earlier, as they used to say. And the other key thing before actually making or putting the wood in is find where the date is stamped and make sure you make a note of that and put it on the bottom, because what you don't want is to have a nicely perfectly formed canopy and then have some writing on it which will spoil the look. So there we go. So right, I'm now going to try and fit the V-shaped canopy mould in with the block of wood into this bottle. Okay, so I've positioned it into the bottle. I'm using a block of wood to stretch the plastic already over the mould, because what I want to do is I heat it. I'll be pulling the plastic bottle down around it, which will then hopefully shrink it around nice and tight, and then underneath. The front bit is a little bit more tricky because I need to try and pull that down, but obviously as it narrows here it can get a bit tight, but I want to trim it, so I'll trim it a little bit and see if that helps this time. So hopefully there's less plastic to get in the way. So as I trim it down with my leather glove on, I'll put it down like that. The only problem is you can see it probably overlaps here. At the back you can melt it out a little bit. But we'll have a go, see what happens. Using my heat gun, put it on the lower setting, and because I'm holding it by hand, I'll also be wearing a nice leather glove for my left hand. So I'm going to start at the back, holding it down neatly like this, get the heat gun warming up, and then hopefully you should see the plastic start to take shape as I put it over. Let's put the heat on. Straight away you see it starts to melt down. Again, this is where it's tricky trying to do it one-handed. Pull the plastic down tight as you can, trying to limit the amount of plastic that overlaps, like that. And what I'm really doing, I'm just going to go around it, and then I'll go, once I've got it taking up some shape, I'll then try and, don't put, not glue. So it's the front bit that's a bit more tricky. You can see it's got the rough shape. Now I'm just going to go around and try and tidy it up. Obviously if this doesn't work I'll use one that I've already made. but I figured I'd try and show you how I've done it. Don't want to put it too close, otherwise it actually melts the plastic and you get the burn marks. But actually it takes out the wrinkles quite nicely from a distance. Again, I've not done the front very well, so just turn this off a second. So this is the problem I'm finding, the creases come up and then it wrinkles there. So around the side is nice, around the back a bit more heat, that will come out nicely. But it's just trying to get this flat front. So that's why I prepared 3 bottles. I don't know if I can pull this actually. See if that will work. Then pull that a little bit flatter, like that. Now that I've got the shape, I can afford to be a little stronger on it. So let's try that. Not too much heat on it. You see it shrinking and tightening down. Actually, that's looking much better already. Put this down. I don't want to burn my hand. It's amazing how hot this plastic gets and how it maintains its heat. So getting there. Just really want to get this front bit sorted out. There we go, that's looking a lot better. Try and get the other side done. If I can get both sides, then I'll be very happy with that. Again, with these big leather gloves on, it's not so easy. Trying to get it all done as fat as I can. Now this is why I wear the leather gloves, because this gets a bit hot. There we go, that seems to be working. Now you've got to, what I have learned is I get carried away and leave the heat on it too long and then it melts it and it goes kind of bubbly white. So I'm just letting that cool in that shape. Actually that's not looking too bad. So you never know, this might be the first time, but let's not get too excited just yet. I'll be cutting out most of this, but I really want to try and get it smooth to about this level, because that's where the canopy will then, I'll cut the curve up and around. Try again. Oops. Probably want to move the glue out of the way. Actually that's coming out really well, so let's just let it cool down a minute. You can feel the heat through the leather gloves. Again, these are thick leather gloves, but I think if you can see from there, I'm not sure how well that looks on the camera. It's not looking too bad from my position. Got a much nicer shape now, which will be easier to cut round, and then that should fit over this part of the fuselage. Oh, I may have just put a hole in it. I'm not going to put any more heat on that bit. I think I've stretched it too much. So I'll let that cool down. Just work on the back bit now. Right, I don't want to go too low down, and actually I'm going to probably end up cutting up a little bit higher around there. There's a little hole there, but that's fine because actually I'm going to be cutting the curve of the fuselage there. So fingers crossed, that'll work. But there you go, that's how I do it. That's how this has worked. Just a bit of patience, don't put too much heat on, and it should be good. I'll let this cool down and cut it out and we can see what it looks like. Okay, so here we have the trimmed down version of plastic, and just to prove that this is still the original one, there's the one bottle, there's the other bottle, so this is still the first one. Yes, I know you can buy 6, but generally this is my first attempt. I said about having the hole, it's you can zoom in a little bit maybe, just about here, but having trimmed it, I've trimmed it whilst on the wood, which seems to have helped it keep its shape. So all the way around. Again, I'll probably try and cut these two bits out. I don't want to put heat on now because it will potentially just shrink it all up. So I'll try and trim that. If not, I'll see what I can do. But actually, very pleased with how that looks. And this time, I've managed to keep the sides of the front, or the front of the canopy, much neater. So I'll just take that off. I need to put the camera down. Bear with me. Okay, this is the canopy off the wooden mould, and as you can see, I did heat it a little bit too long in there, so 2 little holes. But what I've managed to do this time, which I didn't do with this first one, I don't know if you can see, but I've managed to get much better curvature around, which hopefully when I put it on the model will fit better. What I did do on this one, as I've said, is I've cut it higher up. So I need to trim this one the same, which then will hopefully get rid of those 2 little creases as well. So I'm going to have a little fiddle with this on the model and see how that looks. Right, that is a much better, neater fit. It's a shame about the holes. I might try and do another one just to see. But as I said, I just need to trim the back down so that it sits slightly lower at the back. And then, yeah, hopefully that'll be good. But I'm a lot happy with the front now. It's a lot more raised, which is what I was after, and it's neater. So obviously once the airplane is covered and painted and I paint on the metal frame within the canopy, I'll be very pleased with that. So there you go, that's how I do my canopies. I'll trim that off. I will make another one, and we'll see how the rest of the model goes. Okay, what we have here is a second attempt, so the one that I did on camera and then this one that I've done off camera. Again, annoyingly still got a hole in the same place. This must be the way the bottom molds, and then a little one there. But what I've now done, I've added tissue paper to give the frame to the canopy, just tidies it up a little bit. It's not perfect, but again, this isn't a scale model, so this will do. When I fit it to the model at the end, I'll press it down a little bit more so it fits a little bit tighter to the fuselage. But that just gives you an idea of how it's come out. And to be fair, for my first ever canopy Brackdill trial, this obviously isn't my first canopy, but for the first time I've ever tried doing them, quite pleased with how it's come out. I think the other videos I'd watched on YouTube from other people is they're doing larger canopies, so a lot easier. You don't have to try and squeeze this amount of plastic into smaller space. But I think this has come out alright. I'm very pleased with it. And yeah, I can now get on and build with the rest of the build.